there's magic in misery. Life is easy. Why do something difficult? Well, because life is easy. I think we runners seek that out, and we realize that we're never more alive than when we're struggling and suffering. And I think any ultramarathoner can tell you that some of the most poignant moments of their life have been, at an aid station in the middle of the night, delirious, thinking I can't keep going, and just kind of getting up out of that chair and stumbling along and somehow persisting.
Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. Thank you to Tracksmith for their support of For the Long Run podcast. Tracksmith is a Boston-based running apparel brand born from a desire to celebrate both the history and the evolving culture of running. I have been loving their Van Cortlandt long sleeve, which pairs well with the Alston half tights on a brisk fall day. Imagine a world where running injuries don't exist and every runner stays healthy. That's the world I want to live in, and that's exactly the world that Recover Athletics wants to make happen. Recover is the first prehab app for runners. It instantly generates custom prehab programs made up of strength, plyometric, and mobility exercises to help loosen tight muscles, get stronger, and run your best. Their team designed it with top physicians and marathoners like Met. It's guaranteed to make you a stronger and more injury-proof runner. If you want to fix your aches and pains, get stronger, and set PRs, go to the App Store right now and download the Recover Athletics app today. Welcome back. I have Dean Karnazes joining me on the podcast today. Dean, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Thanks for having me run by.
I wish we were doing this on a run, which would be very appropriate for you, but we'll have to link up in Marin at some point soon.
Or I'll come to Boulder.
Fair enough. So for those who don't know, first question is, who is Dean?
Just some bum that you found on the internet, and you're like, I'll have this guy on. But no, I'm a runner, a lifelong runner, and also an author. I've written a few books, and kind of an explorer. I've been on all 7 continents twice now, so kind of a global traveler.
Your life story or your approach to life is like the ethos of this podcast. This podcast is aimed at exploring the why and understanding what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. And you run long, strong, and motivated, emphasis on all of those, but particularly long and motivated, it seems. Has running always been a piece of Dean?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because my earliest childhood recollections are from running home from kindergarten. I so recall, even to this day, waiting anxiously for the bell to ring and just running out of the classroom and running back to my house. And I loved to run when I was a kid. I ran all the way until I was a freshman in high school, and I ran competitively on our cross-country team. And we won the league championships. And then I thought, okay, that's about as far as I can ever take my running. And I stopped running at 15. I thought running, I had better ways to waste my time than, running all over the place. And then on my 30th birthday, I was in a bar in San Francisco, doing what a lot of people do on their 30th birthdays. I was in there drinking with my buddies. And at midnight, I told them I was leaving. And they said, where are you going? It's your 30th birthday. Let's have another round of tequila to celebrate. And I said, no, I'm going to run 30 miles right now to celebrate instead. And they looked at me and they said, but you're not a runner. You're drunk. And I said, yeah, I am, but I'm still going to do it. And I literally walked out of a bar at midnight on my 30th birthday, drunk. And I didn't even own running gear, but I had on these comfortable silk boxer shorts, like these silk underwear. So I peeled off my pants and threw them down the alleyway and just started stumbling off into the night, heading south, knowing that there was a city called Half Moon Bay that was 30 miles away. And I thought, just run there. And literally that night changed the course of my life.
I'm not sure I've ever heard that story. That's incredible. Um, so did you have a plan to do this prior to that evening, or it was just sort of a few beers and tequila in, you're gonna do it?
Something had been stirring within me. I went through college, and then I went through graduate school, and then I went through business school, and I got an MBA, and I had a very comfortable, job in San Francisco, and life was pretty easy. I mean, everything was kind of handed to me, and I think, missing that struggle that running brings to us. I was missing that intensity, and I wanted that back in my life. I didn't like being a business guy, and I think it just all kind of came to a head that particular night. I'm sure the tequila fueled it, but yeah, that night I just thought I'm gonna, I kind of had a premonition. I thought, am I gonna this woman that I was married, and this woman that both my wife and I knew started hitting on me, and she was attractive, and I had this premonition, like, okay, is this where your life is going? Like, are you going to be, 50 years old, bald and fat on your fourth wife, driving a red sports car? Is that really what you want out of your life? And I kind of ran from that vision, I guess, to something else.
One thing you said a few minutes ago about seeking anything but comfort resonated a bit. There was a piece published in Outside Magazine a few years ago at this point that looked at identifying why endurance athletes make such good employees. And the gist of the article and much of the supporting conversation around it was, we all, not all, many of us lead very predictable lives and don't get to experience discomfort. And so we seek it, and we seek this lack of control because everything else is so regimented and everything else is so routine. You wake up, you go to work, you deal with your kids or whatever your family situation is. You eat dinner and you go to bed, and you do it all over again the next day. And to see an intentional change from that, or striving for discomfort, is that's what we do in the endurance world, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that was a theme that I riffed on quite extensively in my first book, that came out in 2005. There's a quote in there, there's magic in misery. Life is easy. Why do something difficult? Well, because life is easy. I think we runners seek that out, and we realize that we're never more alive than when we're struggling and suffering. And I think any ultramarathoner can tell you that some of the most poignant moments of their life have been, at an aid station in the middle of the night, delirious, thinking I can't keep going, and just kind of getting up out of that chair and stumbling along and somehow persisting.
For sure. Let's go back to that 30th birthday. Do you remember the end of that run?
Well, I mean, it's kind of been immortalized because I wrote about it in my book. So I kind of recalled the story. But yeah, I remember I had like $15, and I stuck this wad of cash in my sock. And, about 10 miles down the road, I started sobering up, and I thought, what the hell am I doing? This is ridiculous. And I was starving. So I went up, I mean, there's nothing open, but I came upon a Taco Bell that was open, and I went to go in, and the doors were locked, and I thought, what the heck? And it was a drive-through that was open all night. So I ordered in the drive-through lane, and I got like 6 tacos, and I ate those out of the bag as I kept, kind of stumbling down, heading south. And yeah, I remember the sunrise, and as I was running, all the commuter traffic was starting up, and people were in their like suits heading off to the office, and there was a 7-Eleven in Half Moon Bay that had a payphone out in front. And I'm going to date myself a bit, but this was way before cell phones. So I went up to the cell phone and I called my wife. And she's a dentist, so she had like patients that were scheduled, so she wasn't out at the bar that night. She left early, and I woke her up, and she said, "Well, you've never done this before. You've never been out all night. Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm fine. I just need a ride home." And she said, "Oh, no questions asked. Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm out in front of 7-Eleven." And she said, "The 7-Eleven down on Geary Street?" And I said, "No, actually, the 7-Eleven in Half Moon Bay." She's like, what? Half Moon Bay? How did you get there? And I said, well, I ran. She said, you ran from where? I said, I ran from the bar. And she said, just hold tight. You don't sound very stable. I'll be right there. And that's how it ended.
What did you guys talk about in the car ride back?
I was on a high. I mean, I was babbling about how incredible it was and how much it hurt and how I was chafing and this and that. And the next thing I knew, I was just asleep. She said, you just fell asleep. She said there was like drool coming down your chin and you fell asleep most of the ride home.
That's wild. And so what changed mentally and physically for you after that night?
I loved it. I thought, there is something to be said about really pushing yourself and challenging yourself. And so I started running. I started running regularly. I became kind of quote unquote a runner. I bought running shoes. I remember going to a running store and buying running shoes, and I was running like 5 or 6 miles a day. And I thought it was pretty badass. I'd run out to the Golden Gate Bridge. We lived in San Francisco. And then there was a big steep hill I had to climb to get back to our apartment. And one day I was coming home from from my run, and these two guys just blew past me. And I'm like, what? No, no one passed me. What the heck? And they had backpack on as well. And I tried to pour on the gas to keep up with them, and there was just no keeping up with them. And they disappeared over the top of the hill. And I thought they were like a different species. Like, who are these guys? And I wanted to know their story, but they were gone. Well, when I got to the top of the hill, they were up there doing burpees. And I finally got out of them that they were training for a 50-mile race. And I said, hold it, 50 miles? Like, where are the campgrounds, or, where are the hotels along the way? The guy's like, no, buddy, the gun goes off and the finish line is when you get there, when you run 50 miles. And I just thought it was impossible. And off they went. So I went to the library and I did some research, and I found out where this 50-mile race was. It was outside of Sacramento. So I signed up and I thought, I'm going to try to run 50 miles. And I somehow lived. I mean, it was it was so excruciating, and it was so brutal, but I somehow made it. And I remember sitting in the medic tent afterward, kind of, wrapped in a Mylar blanket, just kind of delirious. And I saw those same two guys, and they were high-fiving each other, saying, wow, we qualified. And I kind of said to them, would you qualify for the insane asylum? And they're like, no, we qualified for the Western States 100-mile endurance run. And I thought, hold it. You say 100, like twice as far as this? And they're like, yeah, 100 miles. And they're like, and it starts at the base of a ski resort. You run up to the top. He's like, you run through rivers. And I'm like, well, like, where do you stop at night? He's like, no, you put on a headlamp and you just run straight through the night. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. And as they were leaving, they looked at me and one guy said, hey, buddy, you qualified too. And when he said that, I'm like, oh my God, I have to. Like, I will never live down that moment. Never I will forget him saying that to me unless I try this race. So that was 1993. And I signed up for the Western States 100 and somehow finished.
What was that finish line like? Sorry. What was that start line like?
Oh, the energy at the start. Well, this is back, in the early 90s. So ultra running was not nearly the sport it is now. It was way more grungy and grassroots. And it was kind of animalistic at the starting line. I just remember people were grunting and howling, and people were, making the sign of the cross on their chest. And when that gun went off, they fire a rifle at the start of Western States. When that rifle went off and just the noise echoed up the valley and just cracked through the air, it was just electrifying.
And so you start up the fire road, and it's 4 miles up to the top, 5 miles up to the top to above 8,000 feet. And what are you thinking up there?
So I'll never forget, we got to this escarpment, it's called, at the very top at Granite Pass. And you're right, it's about 5 miles in. And the sun is rising over Lake Tahoe on one side. And all you can see for as far as the eye goes is more mountains. And I remember asking the guy, like, where do we go from here? And he points to like the most distant mountain that I could see, that anyone could see. And he said, okay, when we get to that point, it's about 75 miles beyond that. to the finish. I'm like, oh, you're kidding. I mean, just seeing it all in front of you like that was so intimidating. And, it was really a step into the unknown. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. There just wasn't as much information, wasn't as freely available back then. So I couldn't just go on the internet and kind of, watch some interviews from people who have done this kind of thing. It was just all through fresh eyes.
So what was that journey like?
The highs, the lows, the points where you just feel like there's no way I can pull this off. The points of sheer elation when you're feeling energetic. My flashlight going out. I mean, this is before rechargeable flashlights, so losing batteries and actually losing my eyesight. Getting some night blindness. And then, coming off the trail onto a high school track and finishing, it was like a mushroom trip in a way. It was just all so interesting and different and exciting.
So that was in the 90s. Since then, you've done some pretty incredible things, including 350 miles in 80 hours and 44 minutes with no sleep. You've done a marathon in the South Pole. You've done a marathon in each of the 50 states in 50 consecutive days. That was 06. You've won Badwater. You've done all these like really incredible. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I'm curious, what would you tell Dean of 1995, for example?
I never really took ultra running seriously as far as racing goes. The sport has changed so dramatically. I mean, I looked at it as adventure. I mean, to me, ultra running was a grand adventure, and I didn't care about how I placed in a race. In fact, there's only one race. You mentioned it, the Badwater Ultra Marathon. That was the only race where I said, okay, I'm going to train to win this race. Like my whole reason for doing this race is to be competitive and to win. And somehow I won. But other than that, I just kind of, I was surfing as much as I was running. I didn't even know what a training block was. So I think I would have taken it a little more seriously from a competitive standpoint. But it was just a different approach that I had. I mean, I always thought of running as an artistic expression, and I wasn't interested in winning. I was just interested in experimenting and doing different types of races in different areas across the globe.
I love that. It's basically how I've approached the sport in the last couple of years. I got my start in running marathons, and really enjoy racing marathons and running long ultras, but not racing. And like I've done rim to rim to rim. I did 50K in Tahoe as like a fat ass fundraiser. I think you actually helped promote that fundraiser back in.
I did. I remember that. Yeah, I was really, that was a great thing you did.
So I don't know what it is, but like I really just enjoy that kind of stuff too. So hearing you say it is fascinating. I was having a conversation with my coach yesterday, and he's like, I don't think you need racing. Races are just to put structure on the calendar. And like my focus is fun. I'm just enjoying the training, and like the training allows for these long adventure days with friends. And I think it's really refreshing to hear that. Obviously I'm not a professional athlete, so like I don't need to race. But I think there is some balance, even for those who are listening who are professional athletes, to like incorporate more of those adventure days. And we definitely saw it in 2020 and 2021 with the pursuit of FKTs and these big epic projects that people are focused on.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's really healthy. I mean, I love the thrill of competing still. I mean, there's just, let's be honest, I'm not ending up on the podium anymore. I am in my age group, but the only people who care about, who's winning your age group are people in your age group. So I kind of don't have that, that tension of thinking I'm going to, compete at any sort of level with the winners. But it's still thrilling to run a race. I mean, I've run over 300 marathons, and there's no way I'm going to run a sub 2:15 marathon. There's just no possibility. And now even running a sub 3 hour marathon is tough. But I still love it. I like doing that. But I more so, to your point, just like doing these adventure runs that are not FKTs. They're just for the adventure of doing something kind of cool on foot. And I could tell you about so many things that, that I've never written about, that people don't even know I've done, that were really amazing. I mean, I'm here in California. There are the California missions that were constructed back in the 1800s. And there were 21 of them that stretch from here in Northern California all the way to San Diego. And the missionaries used the missions as kind of like outposts as they were walking up and down the coast, so that they could stay at these missions as a place of refuge. And I thought, I wonder if someone could, they're a 3-day hike between them, or a 1-day horseback ride. And I thought, I wonder if someone could run between all of these missions. So one time I ran 700 miles just down the California coastline, staying at these missions.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was almost like, why aren't other people doing this? The innkeepers, they don't see many visitors, and they were so welcoming, and they put me up and made me dinner. It was fantastic.
It sounds like what a lot of people do ahead of UTMB, and just bring a credit card and some shoes and see the 105-mile route by foot over 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, no, I mean, I so relate to that, because I've been doing that since the early '90s. I mean, there's so many times I've run, like from San Francisco up to Napa Valley, just with a backpack, a credit card, and a headlamp, and just stopping at convenience stores along the way, and running all night, and not seeing anyone, not seeing any other runners.
Thank you again to Tracksmith for their support of the podcast. I've been a fan of Tracksmith and their community-first efforts ever since my early days of running in Boston. As my miles increase again ahead of some big goals this coming spring, I'm definitely doing it in comfort and style with their gear. I'm also proud to partner with Tracksmith because they're going to donate 5% of your order value to the Michael J. Fox Foundation for all orders, and you'll also get free shipping. The Michael J. Fox Foundation is dedicated to finding a cure and helping those living with Parkinson's. Both of my grandfathers have or had Parkinson's, and I'm grateful of Tracksmith's support for something so personal. Visit tracksmith.com/forthelongrun to see some of my favorite pieces, and all orders that start from that page will contribute towards this donation. Recover Athletics is a supporter of not only this podcast, but also my own running. It was built in Boston by 2 lifelong training partners who got tired of aches and pains getting in the way of their training. In 90 seconds, their app will customize a program for your body and your training. I plugged in some of my more common aches and pains, and I got a custom-built program designed to strengthen the muscles and tendons that will help avoid these issues going forward. Your first custom prehab program is free, and they have an unlimited free trial. You can get it on the App Store right now by searching Recover Athletics, or click the link in the show notes. If you like it and want to upgrade, their premium subscription costs less than one trip to a PT. Give Recover a try today. Your legs will thank you. So one thing I find to be really awesome about what I get to do with this podcast is, so this will be episode almost 200, and I've gotten to speak with, 150 professional athletes along the way, professional elite and Olympic athletes. And there are some commonalities, and some of them are expected and some of them are not. And I'd say that the people that are achieving conventional measures of success, or objective measures of success, are the ones who specifically try and have fun along the way. And so it's really cool to see, like, you've done all these epic things, but it's like fun that's the driving factor for you.
Yeah, and I mean, the at the end of last year, when we could travel overseas, I did a 10-day 10 marathon adventure in Australia. At the outback of Australia, which was incredible. And then right from there, I went to Greece and did 10-day 10 marathon adventure in Greece. And these are not races. I was with other runners in Australia. I was on my own in Greece, and the places I saw, the country I traveled, the people I interacted with, it's almost spiritual. It's almost like a different era of human existence when you're just, on foot, and the way people view you, you're not intimidating. They're curious about what you're doing. And the sights and the smells and everything in a runner experiences is really enlivening.
It's one thing to be motivated and feel engaged for your first marathon of 10 or 15, but where do you go mentally on the third, the fifth, the 10th? I've spoken a bit with Mike Wardian about this, and I'm curious your take as well.
Well, it depends. It depends on the actual endeavor. Like the endeavor in Greece. I mean, it was tough because Greece is hilly and it was hot, but it was all in different historical sites. So a lot of it was just taking in the scenery, and it was kind of engaging in that regard. I've run for 48 hours on a treadmill, and that kind of thing is much more mental. It's your mind is it wanders. And to me, the challenge when you're doing something that's, where you're just trying to, if you're doing like an FKT or something, I don't think you're taking in the scenery. You're trying to perform at your best at every minute that you're moving forward. So, my mind in these difficult challenges is just in the here and now, like the present moment. I think that so much of our life we live somewhere else, right? I mean, the human mind is so active; it's really hard to be present. And I mean, even now as we're chatting, I mean, your mind is, I'm sure, bouncing around with a thousand different questions. Listeners are probably somewhat engaged, and then they're getting a tweet or something. So when I do these really protracted and challenging physical endeavors, I try just to think about the present moment. And I think just to take my next footstep to the best of my ability, and just take your next footstep to the best of your ability. And that's all I do. I try to get that granular where I just say, take your next step, take your next step. And, one time I ran from LA to New York. And I remember that in the Midwest, I was in like a snow and sleet storm for 4 days. And you couldn't see more than 10 feet in front of you. And it was just white, cold, rainy sleet. And that's what I ran in for 10 hours a day for 4 days. And, and it was so mental that if I thought about when is the sun going to come out, if I thought about, I can't wait to sleep tonight, it was so demoralizing because it seems so far away. So I said, instead, just think about taking your next step. Just take your next step. And you almost go into this like Zen-like state. But if you can put yourself there, it's almost like flow, where you just all of a sudden you've finished 10 hours of running and you're done.
So the hardest physical and mental thing I've ever done was rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon. I did that in 2019. And when you're saying that put one foot in front of the other, like these are the words that I said to myself in the last 10K out of South Kaibab. Like I couldn't do anything besides, you can't do anything besides put one foot in front of the other. And it's like the epitome of like how to get through anything. Like you can't do everything all at once. You can't, build a company. You can't build a family. You can't, train for a marathon or an ultra, in one like snap of the fingers. And that's fairly esoteric. But when you break it into like, I'm hiking or running or slogging 10K uphill, like you don't have any other options besides, $15,000 helicopter ride to pull you out of there, which isn't really an option. So getting back to what you were saying initially, it's this like endurance sport and these challenges that we set for ourselves. It's the most basic human experience, right? It's like one foot in front of the other. Repeat until you're done.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of people never put themselves in that situation, so they never experience just what you said. I think people, out of fear or out of the desire for comfort, never push themselves that far. And I think that is one of the reasons runners are like kindred spirits, because regardless of your level of athleticism, if you're a runner and if you finished an ultra, that person knows how to suffer.
Right.
There's no other way around it. Whether you're the winner or you're the last person to cross the line, you've suffered along the way.
So you mentioned fear. I'm curious. What are you afraid of?
I think to me this might sound funny, but my biggest fear is growing irrelevant. I've defined myself as a runner, and I've somehow made a go of it for almost 3 decades, which is somewhat unheard of. Thankfully, I've never had a running related injury, and I'm still able to push really hard. But I kind of I live a very interesting and charming life in a way, in that I could, if you were to come to my house and I was to take you to my garage, I could open up boxes where I have tens of thousands of letters from people and messages, like how I've influenced them and how I've inspired them, and that's really meaningful to me. And I guess I don't want to grow old and useless in a way, and that is really my biggest fear.
I think that it's connection that you don't want to lose.
Yeah, it is actually, it's connection. It's just being forgotten, kind of thing. I don't, maybe that's very Greek, but I don't want to fade away, not yet, at least.
Maybe in 40 years. So what does community mean to you?
I am very much an introvert, and I am very comfortable on my own. I don't mind running off in the hills, or the mountains for 4 or 5 hours, or 4 or 5 days just by myself. So I think that community to me is small. Introverts typically have fewer, deeper relationships with people. I have a couple friends. I can count the number of friends I have on my hand. So those are my tightest relationships. But when you ask about community, to me, the running community are my people. When I go to a group like a fun run, or if I do a book signing and a 5K or something, just like a casual jog, or if I go to an ultra, I'm amongst people that I enjoy and I admire. So, with the pandemic and the kind of group runs that we used to do going away, I never thought I would miss it so much, but I really do.
Yeah, I totally feel you on that. I think as far as you can get from an introvert, and I just like thrive on these, like I love racing because it means it's a race weekend, which means, it's all the best people in one place. Like being in Tahoe, in Palisades, Tahoe for Western States or Broken Arrow, like that's my that's my like mecca. I love that stuff, and it's been sad to not have that the last couple of years. You mentioned the group runs. The last group run I did before the pandemic was in Santa Monica with Mike Wardian, who just like defines the running community and defines like community and passion. And it was like a really odd send off. And odd meaning like couldn't have picked a better person for that, or very few options for someone who epitomized a send off like that. And so I definitely miss events like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Mike and I are good friends, and we I put on a race here in November in the Bay Area. It was called the Golden Gate Trail Classic, and I had Mike come out, and we got to do a fun run just out to the Golden Gate Bridge with about, I don't know, this group maybe 25, 30 people. And both of us almost cried. We were just like, that was the first time I think he'd maybe done a fun run like that since, I
Yeah,
didn't know you ran with him the last time in LA, but I think that was the first time for both of us in almost a year and a half or 2 years we'd done
right.
anything like that. And it was really special. I mean, honestly, when you do that kind of stuff all the time, you kind of, you take it for granted.
Yeah.
And then I think both of us just looked at each other and said, wow, we love these people. We love doing things like this.
So you've alluded a bit to it, but I'm curious if you intentionally practice gratitude.
Oh, absolutely. Very much. I mean, I watch the sunset and the sunrise almost every day. I will never take what we have for granted. And especially as I'm getting older, I'm learning to be content, which it was a skill for me, because I was always, so anxious to be moving, and just to be content, just being is really a challenge.
What do you think? Let's say you fast forward 10, 15 years, and what are you really proud of?
As much as I've done, and as many people as I've met, I mean, the simple pleasures of being a good husband, and mostly a good father to my kids. I think that, no matter what you do in life, if you fail your kids, you kind of fail at everything.
I will take your word for that. I hope to experience that component of life at some point. Not the failure part, of course.
Don't, you only get one chance to screw up your kid, so don't do it.
My dad would say you get plenty of chances, but so on the flip side, let's talk about success. So one of the reflections, again, looking back on 150 to 200 episodes, is people define success in so many interesting ways. And I'm curious how you define what does success mean to you?
I think success is living up to your potential. I think it's almost a sin if you don't. Not all of us are Einstein, but to fall short of your potential, I think is failure. And I think success is being the best that you can be.
How do you personally ensure that you're doing that?
I think by keeping a curious mind and never stop exploring. So be it my physicality or intellectually as well. I mean, I'm working on a PhD in classics. I'm 100% Greek, and I've studied ancient Greek culture quite extensively. But now I'm on a 8-year plan. But a class or two every semester keeps me mentally engaged, and it's as challenging as any ultra. But I think when we stop moving forward, we kind of die.
Yeah, I think that definitely resonates. And again, it's the observation I've had over all these episodes is that people who define success and define progress as something that they can control or subjectively are objectively often the most successful. So it's fascinating to see the qualitative and quantitative metrics sort of match up while not intending for one to affect the other. It's like, let's have fun, let's be curious, let's, strive. And usually that leads to conventional success versus like, I want to run a sub 3-hour marathon, or I want to run 100 miles, or I want to win XYZ. And it's fascinating how that curiosity and like, how good can I be usually allows you to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And the other component, at least with me, is that I don't view success as what I have, but what I've given. So, to me, when I get an email from, someone that says, wow, I read your book and, you changed my life. Like I stopped smoking or stopped drinking, and I'm going to try to run a half marathon now and maybe a marathon one day. To me, that is the most fulfilling thing I could ever have. I mean, that means more than, you can't put a price on that. So, being able to inspire someone to live a better life, I think is a calling beyond anything that I could do individually.
The last conversation I had with my grandfather was in 2019, and he was dying of Parkinson's, or he was dying of complications around Parkinson's. But in that last conversation, we talked about like, why are we here? And his 80-something-year-old summary of why he was here, or why humans are here, is to leave the world a better place than when you entered it. And I think if more people had a similar approach as he had or as you have, I think the the world would be a much better place. Let's put it that way.
It's so funny you say that, because I have a daughter, Alexandria, she's a little bit of a sage herself. I mean, her motto since she was a teenager is leave it better than you found it. And that's how she practices her life. That's basically the ethos she carries with her in anything she does, is leave it better than you found it. And I think that what your grandfather said is very poignant. And I think that's a really courageous and high-minded way to live your life.
I definitely think so. I think that I'll just like, I'll always remember that conversation. And we talked about like, that's how I want to live my life. If I could fast forward, 50, 70, 80, whatever, that many years ahead, and I can look back and remember that conversation that we had and say, I did that. To me, that's success at the highest level.
Yeah, I think from a practical perspective, how do you achieve that goal? And, certainly there are big moments when you can look back and say, did I leave the world better than I found it? But there are those everyday moments, where it's just a matter of like, okay, I'm not going to leave this gel wrapper on the side of the trail, or if I see it, I'm going to pick it up and put it in my pack. And I think that those little daily things we do they add up, and they really create who you are. This was, wow, 12 years ago now. There was climate change. To me, has always been something I've been concerned about. And I kept hearing, and this again we hear about it all the time now, but this, I thought 12 years ago we were hearing about it all the time. And I said, am I contributing? And if so, how? And I thought, well, one of the main polluters is cars. So I sold my car and I said, I'm not going to own a car. And I haven't owned a car in 12 years.
Wow.
It's gotten easier, with Uber and Lyft now, because, if you're in a place where you just can't keep going, you can Uber home, but I don't. I still stay true to that same thing, that if I have to go somewhere, I do it all on foot.
That's awesome. Another component of who you are is you're a writer. Talk to me about that process, and you released another book recently, right?
Yeah, A Runner's High, and is the title of that one. And running is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. So, I'm becoming more proud of my writing. I 3 of my books have been New York Times bestsellers. But writing is like running. You can never have the perfect book. You can never have the perfect race. You can have a good race, but never perfect. So a Runner's High has received critical acclaim from really bookish reviewers. So these are not, just other runners saying, oh, that was a great book. These are like Kirkus Review. These are hardcore literary reviewers that have said, this guy can write. And that makes me really proud. It's taken me, I think, 5 books to learn how to write. But I get, I don't know, 3 or 4 messages a week from people that say, wow, your book it wasn't what I expected at all. In fact, before this interview, I got a message from a guy that said, I started in on your book last night. I was going to read a chapter or 2 before bed. And he said, 6 hours later, I finished the book. And he said, and then I got up and went for a run. I just had to. So people are surprised, I think, when they read my book, because they're like, they don't expect much. I mean, let's face it, the running book genre is not known necessarily as the best writing, but this people are like, wow, I can't believe it. That was really like well written, and so that makes me proud.
What's your goal with the writing?
My writing it's literary enjoyment, literary pleasure for the reader. So my books are propulsive. And in that, I mean that from the very first sentence, if not the very first word, I want it to be compelling and a page turner. So I think of that going into writing the book. Like, how are you going to keep the reader engaged? How are you going to do unexpected things? How are you going to keep it interesting and fresh and want them to keep going and come along with you on the journey? So, one of the most common comments I hear about people reading my book is like, wow, I felt like I was in your shoes. Like I was right there when you threw up on the trail side or whatever. And there are literary tricks you learn as a writer to keep people engaged. One is concrete detail, to talk about little unexpected things that, we notice, like a bug that landed on my sunglasses and, it's smeared. Details like that, where, another runner is kind of nodding their head like, oh, I had that happen to me one time. And so I've learned these tricks, over the course of writing 6 books.
Very cool. So we've talked about gratitude. We've talked about success and curiosity. We've talked about just putting one foot in front of the other. I think a lot of people that are going to listen to this or are listening to this right now, hello, are probably already runners, and they're probably looking to do it for a while or to get better in some capacity, or go longer, go faster, or maybe they just want to do it for the rest of their lives, like you do. So what's Dean's, top trick, or top, not trick, but What would you say to someone who wants to emulate what you've done over the last 30 years in terms of consistency?
I think you need to look at the world through the lens of being the best animal you can be. So everything you do is in service to being an athlete. And that would be, your training, your cross training, your diet, your sleep patterns, and your interpersonal relationships. I think that to perform your best, you need to have harmonious interpersonal relationships. So optimizing all of these things, it's not just one thing that you do. It's all of these things through that lens of being the best animal that you can be. That I think gives you both performance and longevity.
Totally agree. Love it. Well, Dean, this has been a pleasure. I hope we can share a run in Marin or Boulder or somewhere soon.
Let's meet halfway in between. You start running, I'll start running.
You might get there before I do, but if you let me bike, maybe I'll have a chance. Awesome. Well, that sounds good. If for those who don't follow you yet, where can we find you on the internet?
Someone told me you type in Dean in Google. I'm like one of the first persons that comes up. So just type in Dean. My last name starts with a K, but I've got a website. I'm on social media and all that kind of stuff. And check out one of my books. Check out A Runner's High if you want to read something unexpected.
Awesome. Dean, thanks so much. And we'll definitely see you out there.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf.